Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see you. Please, come on in. Have a seat. I've got hot cocoa on the stove and a nice big couch by the fire where you can all sit as I weave my terrible tales of dread and fear today. Well, maybe not too much dread and fear. We do like to keep things cozy around here. On Cozy Horror. With me, Dr. Plague. Let's get everybody settled so you can hang out and enjoy some great stories with yours truly, Dr. Plague. Today's theme is going to be malicious entities, be they ghostly or fleshly. I'll let you be the judge. Let's start things off strong with an oldie but a goodie. Brought to us by Lillian Creepwell, let's hear a story about a strange girl and her stranger friend. Let's hear a story about my daughter's friend, Thelma. Imaginary friends. We've all had them. Oh, sure. We all get the occasional creepypasta about them. But, at worst, they're just a symptom of treatable mental illness. They're never actually real. And yet, right now, I'm not so sure. I don't know if it was my daughter's imaginary friend that did this to her, but what happened to my daughter, only 2 weeks ago no less, was a horrific tragedy. And I don't think the imaginary friend she had before was completely non-compliant in it. Okay, let's start at the beginning. I used to be just a normal mom. My name's Ella. My daughter, Susan, is 5. Now, she'll be 5 forever. Off topic there. Susan used to go to kindergarten outside town. We live in Blackthorn, Ohio. Her teacher, Miss Adina, actually lived 2 doors down from us, and she'd been nothing but an angel to me and my Susan, especially during this awful time. Honestly don't know what I would do without that wonderful woman. But it was during her kindergarten that the fiasco started. I came to pick her up, and she told me she'd made a friend at school. Oh, really? What's their name? Thelma, she said cheerfully. She's invisible and lives in a giant playground world full of stars she created. At this point, I, of course, figured Thelma was imaginary. She sounds wonderful, I said. She is. Miss Adina told me to stay back and clean the toy corner during break time. At first I thought it would be boring, but then Thelma showed up and magically cleaned it, and we spent the rest of break time playing together. Susan always had such an imagination, and she was such a big talker. On the ride home, Susan described her new friend's appearance. She's black all over, and her clothes and hair are too. She's got little white dots sparkling all over her, and she says she's 7 years old. I thought it was just adorable at the time. That night, Susan came to me saying that Thelma would be staying at our house for the week, and she would be playing with her. Oh, okay, I said again, with an amused smile. The next day, Susan came home with another story about Thelma. She opened up a way to her world during break time, and we played in there all day. She said soon she's going to let me stay forever. At this point, I got mildly concerned. Susan, Thelma's imaginary. You know that, right? Susan just giggled. No, she's not. She's sitting next to me in the car right now. And she pointed at an empty seat next to her. I was relieved to know that this wasn't anyone grooming Susan at school, but I was mildly concerned for her psyche at this point. But through mental gymnastics, I erased my worries. She's just pretending, I said to myself. Lots of kids have imaginary friends at her age. She'll get over it. She's not insane. It's probably just me. And maybe I was. I know that I'm probably insane now. Susan came home from school the next day with a concerned look on her face. Thelma doesn't like you, she said in the car. She says you're boring and always telling me what to do, and she hates that. That night, there were more mental gymnastics on my part. Thelma isn't real. Thelma isn't real. I repeated to myself over and over again. For the next few days, until the end of the week, it was normal. Susan coming home from school each day with a new story about what she and Thelma did together that day. Until Sunday. On Sunday morning, Susan told me that Thelma was going to take her to her world tonight. I didn't respond. It was an odd combination of scared, in denial, and angry at myself for being worried about this. It's just an imaginary friend. Just an imaginary friend. Just an imaginary friend. On Monday morning, I woke up, but I couldn't find Susan anywhere. The police were called, but they didn't find her either. I was hating myself, while at the same time trying to reassure myself that it wasn't Thelma who had done this. And yet, just last week, the police found Susan's body. She was discovered in a tree in the forest in our town, with 7 different stab wounds and a terrified expression on her face. Now I don't know whether it really was someone grooming her, whether someone else was in on the act, or whether it was something else entirely. If anyone knows anything about Susan or Thelma, please tell me. I need to know, and I need to know now. Short, but definitely sweet. Let's move on to another great story. Written by our good friend APCleriot. Let's hear a story about some urban exploring that goes a little awry. Let's hear a story about a time when they were thrown to the dogs. I love my older brother, but sometimes I wish he'd died. We were kids. I was only 10 and he was 16. He had just got his driver's license, and we went everywhere in our town because we'd seen so little of it growing up. Every night, Jack would make some excuse to take our family K car. They don't make them anymore. Somewhere, and our parents would always go along with it. They knew we were just excited to explore this new freedom my brother had attained. Fine, but take Peter with you, my mom said. I could tell Jack was a bit irritated to have to bring me everywhere. I was his luggage, as he and his friends had so affectionately defined me. I could have made an excuse not to go, give him a little space, but I loved my brother. If he was doing something, then it was worth doing, and I couldn't stand to hear about it secondhand. I wanted to be there, sharing his cool experiences with his group of high school friends. I had no friends my own age. I guess I really had no friends. One such friend of Jack's was Kyle, a goofy, intense guy who could never really sit still. He always wanted to pick me up and spin me around. I hated it. Jack made him stop when he noticed how uncomfortable it made me. On what turned out to be our last drive around Bridal Veil Lake, we picked up Kyle. He was waiting on the porch in the rain and looked to be in a pissy mood. His discontent worsened when he saw me riding shotgun. "Jack, really? You brought the kid?" "Get in the back, Pete," Jack said. I crawled between the front seats, and I was happy to be there. I didn't care where I sat. Kyle got in the car and slammed the door behind him. "Drive," he snapped. "What's your problem?" Jack asked as he backed out of the driveway. "Nothing," Kyle said. Didn't really seem like nothing. Parents are being jerks again. I didn't understand then that Kyle's parents were alcoholics, and nasty drunks to boot, and his home life made ours look perfect by comparison. "Sucks, dude. You want to stay at our place tonight?" Kyle didn't answer. He stared out the window. "It's that way." "The nunnery?" "No, the 7-Eleven. Yeah, the effing nunnery. What else?" "You better cool it with the attitude or you can walk," Jack told him. What could Kyle say to that? Jack could kick him out anywhere. Then he'd have a sad walk back home in the rain. I kinda liked that idea. We drove for a while in silence until Kyle finally apologized. "Sorry, man, this was supposed to be fun." "It's no biggie," Jack said. Our dad would say that too, whenever we messed up. "We're going to the nuns?" I asked, as the reliant little K-car crossed the intersection of Ferry Street, where our old house used to be. Neither of them answered the question. The neighborhood, as most know, has the special privilege of being located a few blocks from a psychiatric hospital and a closed-down nunnery. The two institutions used to be associated with each other. Nuns were also nurses during the Korean War, treating vets with PTSD. The nunnery had been vacated since 1970, way before I was born, and while the Catholic Church still owned the land, they seemed to have forgotten about it. Castle-like walls on the ground were torn apart by strands of strangling ivy. Trees that had been cared for became imbalanced and toppled before slowly dying in the mud. The big house, the convent I supposed, where all the nuns used to live, lost its white paint to the elements, and a big crucifix had been dragged from somewhere inside and thrown into the dried-out fountain. This was what I remember of the nunnery before we moved. When we pulled onto the shoulder of the gate, the crucifix hadn't moved in the intervening years. "Right where I left it," Kyle said to himself. I wasn't sure if he meant the crucifix or something else. Maybe I didn't hear him right. The rain had intensified and created a racket on the windshield and the roof. "I didn't bring an umbrella," Jack said. "Buy you a whole raincoat after," Kyle said. "Are you sure it's not stealing?" Jack asked. "How the hell is it stealing? Nobody owns it." Kyle had apparently been visiting the nunnery a few times to pillage items left behind. He'd sold a rug and some silverware to a pawn shop and made a few bucks. But he wasn't the only one with the same idea. On our second expedition, he'd heard some movement on the second floor and gotten freaked out and run away. Any intelligent person would give up at that point and get a job. Kyle thought it better to rope Jack into the scheme. Jack was big, tough, and calmly fierce if the situation called for violence. I'd seen him take down the DeRollo twins during an argument over baseball. They attacked him, so it wasn't wrong that he defended himself with a baseball bat. The twins had ended up in the ER. "They're bound to have some good stuff in the basement," Kyle said, "and the rain's letting up. Let's go." Jack turned to the back seat. "You should stay here, Pete. This won't take long." "What? No way." "I'll lock the door," Jack pleaded. "Just lie down. No one will see you." I shook my head. "No, Jack, I can't. Someone will get me." Kyle chuckled, but Jack shut him up with a glare. "Okay, stay close and be quiet." It felt like a dream. Wet gravel crunched under my sneakers. I stepped in a deep puddle because I had stared up at the dark windows, wondering if anyone or anything was staring back. "Jack," I said, "I'm scared. I don't want to go in." He didn't seem to hear me. Kyle opened the door slowly and turned on his flashlight. The end of the beam showed an empty hallway and a set of stairs leading to the second floor. Kyle went inside. Jack guided me forward and knelt down to say, "Stay in front of me where I can see you, okay? Sorry for bringing you here. I know it seems spooky, but it's just an old building. If there's anyone here, they're probably homeless and just trying to stay warm and dry. They won't bother us." He turned on his flashlight and handed it to me. I felt a little better after the pep talk. It was dark, and it smelled like a church mixed with dirt, but that was all. Or so it seemed. In his usual impatient, agitated way, Kyle went ahead, making a ruckus as he opened drawers in an adjacent kitchen, and swearing when he found nothing of value. He appeared in the hallway and grasped a doorknob sticking out of the wall I had failed to notice. "This is the basement, but it's locked." As soon as he said locked, the practically seamless door swung open, which was the cause for more swearing. Kyle had been counting on the lock because he thought it meant the basement and its imagined loot were untouched. "No point now," Jack said. He laid a hand on my shoulder and started to turn away. "Whoa, wait, we can at least take a look," Kyle said. Jack hesitated, and I remember distinctly how he gripped my shoulder and crouched slightly to look me in the eye. "What do you think, Pete?" I thought we never should have come here. What I said, however, was that we should take a look. I didn't want to be luggage anymore. Jack giving me the power to choose felt like an opportunity. "Yeah, nice," Kyle said. He gave me a high five and rustled my hair. "Kid's getting cool." It was the nicest thing he'd ever said to me. Jack smirked. He's always been cool. You're just slow. The chuckle from Kyle was forced. He looked momentarily stung by the barb. I think it was then that I began to realize how important my brother's approval was to Kyle. Come on, Jack said. We're wasting time. I opened the door, the nervous energy returning to Kyle. He was like a dog excited for a walk. My flashlight illuminated rough stone steps worn smooth by the passage of 1,000 feet. The walls were similar, though rougher, and there were hooks supporting oil lamps because no electricity had been extended to this part of the building. Creepy, I said. Yup, Jack agreed. Come on. Kyle took the lead again as we descended the cylindrical shaft to a shockingly wide and long corridor. The arches in the ceiling, the floor, the walls were all constructed with red bricks, shedding their mortar. Someday, the weight of the house above would crush the tunnel. I hoped it wasn't today. What is this place? Jack asked. Kyle shrugged. Looks like a dungeon. Look at I started. The tiny barred window at one of the 6 identical doors I'd been pointing at changed. There had been some movement there, like dirty fingers retracting from a cell. What is it? My brother asked. I continued to shine the light at the tiny window, but the sound of a shuffling footstep further along the corridor snatched my attention. Did you hear that? I asked. Hear what? Nope, Kyle added quickly. He didn't look scared or was working hard to seem like it. There were 3 cell doors, evenly divided on the sides of the corridor. At the farthest end there stood a heavier door, blockaded with boards nailed to the frame. It's a passage to the hospital, Jack concluded. The nuns must have done some work here. He didn't add that the work in question was funerary. I found that out later and far too late. Not that knowing at that moment would have changed the outcome. Like the idiot he was, Kyle went to the big old door at the end and tried to pry the boards away. What are you doing? Jack asked. Probably leads to the hospital. Right, Kyle said. The board ripped off. Water-soaked and termite-infested wood crumbled in his hands. So it isn't in use anymore. Maybe it was used for storage for a while. He didn't say if he meant the nuns or the current hospital staff across the street. Taking things from them would certainly be stealing. And Jack wasn't interested. Hey, man, we're not stealing from the hospital. Of course not, Kyle said, too slowly for my liking. I meant the nuns. Maybe the nuns left something. Why would anyone leave something valuable behind a nailed-up door? I asked. Ever hear of buried treasure, Pete? Besides, like you said, we should look. Come on, it's fun. It was gross and dirty. I didn't move and continued to look at the cells flanking our position in the corridor. There were piles of rubbish underneath a moldy workbench near the bottom of the steps. I encouraged us to search there first, but they were too committed to tearing off the planks. That's when I heard the murmur of a prayer. Guys, I said, but they were focused on the door. The voice continued in frantic whispers. Please, beg you, Michael. Do not abandon me. I thought someone was in one of the cells and that they might be afraid of us. If I were homeless, I'd probably stay in an abandoned place and be afraid all the time about somebody wanting to hurt me, too. It's okay, I said, still unsure where the scared voice had come from. We're not out to hurt anybody. Kyle pulled the last plank off the door at that very moment. Guys, I tried again, but they were talking about what to do next. The door still wouldn't open. Kyle wanted to kick it down. Jack thought they should think about it first. Here, come here, the voice said quietly, and this time I knew which cell it came from. Hello? I'm in here, sounded like a man whispering. Help me, I'm here. Please come. Guys, I said loudly, and unfortunately at the same time, Kyle started laying his boot onto the passageway door. I moved closer to Jack, and we exchanged a look. He was sweaty and afraid. There's somebody in that cell, I told him. What? He didn't understand. Kyle's boot plunged through the rotten door. Immediately, a current of smelly air was freed to caress our faces and our bodies. There's somebody... Jack reached for Kyle too late. His dumb friend rammed his body into the remnants of the door, and instead of stopping him, Jack tripped and fell on top of him. That's why I was the only one to see. Ahead, a gently curving ramp ascended, and against a painted wall came the shadows of what I can only describe as a king. His silhouette wore a tall and ornately evil crown, and he laughed as the shadows of several leashed dogs tugged him down the ramp. The shadows, however, were all that appeared. Nobody came down that ramp, only the laughter and the heavy breathing of the dogs. Jack scrambled backwards off his friend, and Kyle crawled out of the tunnel doorway. There was nothing to be seen there, yet I knew. They did too, despite their eventual denials. Something evil lurked ahead, and it had seen us. Leashes slapped the floor as if dropped, and padded feet and claws scrambled for purchase on the smooth concrete. The dogs had been let go. It sounded like it, the tunnel still appearing empty. "Run!" a female voice shouted from one of the cells. "Run! Run!" Her screams rang in my ear. I didn't know who ran first or how I ended up at the door at the top of the basement stairs. When my hands couldn't turn the knob, my legs gave out. The invisible horror pursued us. Jack raged against the basement exit. Strong arms wrapped around my wrist and lifted me and turned. Kyle was screaming in my ear. "Jack!" I called. He turned around and saw that Kyle had picked me up as a human shield. "Jack!" I pleaded. He just watched as Kyle threw me at the growls as they climbed the stairs. I hit the landing and felt their teeth sink into my flesh. The animals tore away my skin and feasted on my muscles. I was still alive when they pierced my stomach. When would I die? The pain made me wish for death. Torrid screaming from below, from the cells, suddenly faded. The ordeal was ending. Only one pained howl remained. Mine. "Pete! Pete! Pete!" Jack said, over and over. The basement doorway was open now, and Kyle walked through it. Jack picked up whatever was left of me and placed what had to be my mangled corpse in the back seat. "Dad will be mad about the blood," I said. Confusion entered Jack's concern. "What blood, Pete? There's no blood. You're fine." He went to the driver's seat and started the car. Kyle wouldn't look at us. "Sorry," he said before exiting the car at his house. "Sorry, Pete. I'm sorry you fell. Tried to catch you." It was a lie. I didn't have the will to deny it, though. By the time we got home, I realized there really wasn't any blood or physical injuries at all. I got out of the car and followed Jack inside. Our parents were watching TV in the living room while we ate Neapolitan ice cream in the kitchen. It seemed very normal until Jack put me in bed and stretched out in his. We shared a room. "You okay, Pete?" "Yeah," I lied. "But what happened there?" He stared at the ceiling. "I don't know." That was the last we spoke of the nunnery. Jack stopped driving for fun. I stopped hanging out with him. I didn't see Kyle again until a decade later. I was waiting for an order at a burger place, and a completely hairless man walked in. I didn't recognize him as Kyle until I was on my way home. I don't know why he lost all his hair, and I didn't care. My brother and I grew apart pretty fast. He hadn't tried to stop Kyle. None of us should have broken into the nunnery. I never forgot the feeling of being torn apart by those dogs. I'd only seen their shadows cast on the walls of the tunnel in my waking life. In my nightmares, they were huge mutts with bloodied maws. The Dark King remained a shadow in both worlds, revealing nothing more of himself but cruel laughter on the wrong side of midnight. I try so hard to sleep, but it's not much better to meet him in my dreams. It might be worse. Jack had been in university a few years by the time I reached high school and gained access to drugs and alcohol. While his life took off into careers and family and prosperity, mine declined. I never finished high school, became addicted, and struggled to make a connection with anyone. Eventually, my parents and Jack ceased contact altogether. I'm alone, but never truly alone. His shadow follows. Sometimes I can smell his dogs. Nothing short of total substance-based annihilation of my mind provides temporary reprieve. I tried therapy, but the experts call my experience a delusion and put me on strong antipsychotic meds that don't work. I went to a priest, but he kicked me out and said I should see a doctor. Rehab didn't work, obviously. So I'm writing to all of you. Maybe you can help. At least, if you care enough to have read this far. The nunnery isn't hard to find. I think I have to go back. Most of whatever I am is still there. The dogs want to rest. The king is indifferent, so long as I suffer. I'm tired. There's comfort in giving in and giving up. I'll be waiting in one of the cells with the others. They know. They understand. I hate you, Jack. I miss my brother. It seems like every time I think urban exploring might be a fun pastime, I come across one of these little stories and maybe decide to take a step back. Moving on, let's hear a story from Healthy Highlights 71 about something that may be supernatural, but may also be entirely invasive. Let's hear a story about what's living in the attic. To this day, I'm not really sure what was living in my attic. This is my story. It happened 2 years ago. I was 25 years old, and I was living in a big old house from the 1920s. It was my grandma's house, but she's in a care home now, so I live there by myself. I've lived there for about 5 years now, but it still makes me scared to be home alone when it's storming. All the sounds are so scary. No matter what I do to calm myself, I just can't relax. I've thought about moving, but my grandma loves that I live there. It makes her happy, and I just don't want to disappoint her. It was November, and it was a Friday, and I didn't have any plans for the weekend. I was just going to watch some movies and maybe clean the attic. I hate the attic. It's cold and dark, and I always get this weird feeling when I think about it. It's been 3 years since I was up there, and I always hear some strange noises from the attic, coming from up in the rafters. There must be an animal living there. It's cold outside, so it was probably just trying to stay warm. At about 3 p.m., I decided to go have a look at the attic. I took a deep breath and slowly walked up the stairs. I walked up to the attic and I touched the door handle, pressing it down as I tried to open the door. It wouldn't open. I started to push it down, but it felt like something was blocking the door. How was that possible? How could something get in the way from the inside? I pulled again, pushing hard with all my might this time, and slowly the door opened. I got inside and looked around with a flashlight, wanting to see what had been pressing against the door. It wasn't hard to figure out, but I stood there for a second, looking at the dresser with real puzzlement. How did that get in front of the door? It can't just have moved by itself. I felt my heart beat faster, my breath coming on quicker. Who did this? And how? Why? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move, and I shone the flashlight at the place. I couldn't see anything, though. I started to get this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I called out, asking if anyone was there. I heard a loud bang, and I turned around as fast as I could and just ran. I was falling halfway down the stairs, crying and running for my life. I heard something behind me, coming closer and closer. I ran out the door, running away from the house as fast as possible. I was about 8 feet away from the house, and then the worst possible thing happened. I tripped over something, and in that second I knew that whatever was chasing me was going to catch me. I closed my eyes, seconds feeling like hours, but it felt like time had stopped, when all of a sudden I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, I blinked fast and looked around. It was dark outside. What had happened? Why was Why was I still alive? What was it that had chased me? I stood up slowly, checking for injuries. I was fine, apart from some bruises and a small cut on my leg. I was scared to go in the house alone, and I didn't have my phone. I decided to walk to the nearest neighbor. It was a little distant, but it wasn't long before I was standing on my neighbor's front porch. I knocked on the door, the lights illuminating the entrance, and I saw a man carefully open the door. He asked why I was knocking in the middle of the night. Didn't I know people were sleeping? I looked at him confused, asking what time it was. He looked at his watch, yawning as he said 2 a.m. I was so confused. How could I have been out for so long? I asked him if he could call my dad's number, and he gave me his phone. I dialed my dad's number and waited for him to answer, and right before it rang out, he picked up the phone, angrily asking who was calling in the middle of the night. I told my dad it was me, and I needed him to come pick me up from the neighbor's house. I thought I was attacked by someone inside Grandma's house. He was silent for a second. Then he told me to stay where I was. It only seemed like a couple of minutes before he was pulling up. Soon as he arrived, I told him everything. He looked at me and said, "But it's Sunday. You're saying you were attacked on Friday, so what happened the last few days?" I started to cry. What had happened to me? My dad drove me to the hospital, and they examined me. They took some tests, and when they came back, they told me that they'd found drugs in my system. They said the drugs must have made me unconscious, and when they had a look at my body, they found signs that I'd been chained up, starved, and beaten. Meanwhile, the police went to the house, and they found a man. He'd been living in the attic for 2 years. He'd been watching me every day without me knowing it. He was scared and angry when I came up to the attic, so he decided to drug me and attack me. I don't know what else he did to me. He was arrested and sent to jail. To this day, I'm still in therapy. I don't live at that house anymore. I'm scared of everything now. I hope that one day I can trust people again. And, well, that's the end. Really makes you want to go have a look at what's living in your own attic, doesn't it? Coming up next, let's hear a story from Daniel Lowrick about a strange entity discovered in the school he calls alma mater. Let's hear a tale about how a little girl tried to kill us all. The cigarette smoke chokes me, but I don't let myself cough. Instead, I keep it inside. Everything in me wants to let it out, expel it like some kind of poison disagrees with my organs. Still, I keep it inside. It's my first cigarette ever, in a classroom far away from the populated part of the school. I won't let myself look like a wimp, not in front of her. I couldn't give a crap about the popular kids standing with us in the room. I've never felt the need to care about them. However, when I heard the girl of my dreams was going with them, I just had to be there. That's pretty much how I found myself here. No one goes here anymore. Not after that kid died. Honestly, it was kinda sad. Some poor little girl gets lost and ventures into a neglected and dangerous part of the school on her own, on her very first day at that, and has a large table fall on her and injure her pretty badly. Then, slowly, she loses her life as she bleeds out. You'd expect there to be an outcry of some sort, yet the school pushes the blame onto the parents and bashes them. The local paper joins in, and before you know it, the whole town is bullying this family about not teaching their child proper safety rules. A 7-year-old girl was supposed to be taught proper safety rules. It sounds as ridiculous as it actually is. What do we get from all this? We get lectures on how we, as students, should keep the younger students safe. We get ghost stories that quickly spread across the school about the young girl and how she can still be heard crying. We get a special assembly today on the 1-year anniversary of her death, an assembly where we have a moment of silence for her. But don't worry, guys. Refreshments are provided. Seems like everyone around here is an insensitive bastard. I pause my thought to find Alicia looking at me. I take another deep pull off the cigarette I'm holding. I take it better this time. I still feel the need to cough, but not as intense as before. Is this what romance is worth? Because as my brain gets cloudy and I drown in nicotine, it seems worth it. That is when the crying starts. I almost didn't hear it at first. It was soft, but definitely audible. I turn around, but there's nothing. We all start looking around. Have we been caught? None of our teachers would make that soft a sound if they caught us. Must be a small animal. Then it dawns on us all at once, and a nervous chuckle takes over the room. It can't be the stories about the dead girl. It just can't. It's probably just someone playing a prank on us. Still, the whole group slowly but surely creeps towards the door. No one admitting they're scared, but everyone ready to run at the same time. I take another pull off the cigarette, then I hear another cry. It's time for us to go. However, a thud behind us makes us turn around, and then a slam behind us makes us turn around again. Something distracts us, something in the dark of the room, just long enough for us to turn away from the door, long enough for it to slam shut. We're all trapped now. Everyone's scrambling, trying to open the door. The cool kids are still nervously chuckling, thinking it must just be the wind. However, the wind can't close a door hard enough for it to feel like it's been welded to the door frame. We can't get out of the room. That's becoming clearer now. You see, the thing about the light and the dark is that you can see in either one. The other just has to be absent. As the door blocks out the light from outside, the room inside becomes clearer. The dark corner is now taking shape. There's a desk there, a large, heavy one, and underneath it is a small frame. It looks like a doll, but it's faintly moving. It has to be a child. I'm not an idiot, not by any means. I'm a skeptic, definitely, but not an idiot. I'm seeing a ghost live out its last moments, a child live out her last moments. The cigarette is on the floor now, and so am I. We've all fallen to the floor, unable to move. I look around me, and it seems like we've been pinned by an invisible force. It sounds ridiculous, but it makes sense. A force more powerful than our meek bodies can handle. She's not living her last moments. We're living her last moments. I feel like I'm about to die. I'm not ready for this. I'm too young. I just want to go home to see my family. I just want to go back to class. I was so excited to see my friends today, to be around people who I care about. All things that she must have thought about. All things I'm thinking about now. I turn my head, and she's in the corner, sobbing, a child with nowhere to go, and no one to help her. Yet she keeps asking for help. I can't die here. I hope she gets help. I hope I get help. That's when I realize she never got help, and maybe neither will I. We're all going to die here, and I'm terrified by that thought. But I'm not the one I should be afraid for. My life, as scared as I am, doesn't matter. I should be helping the one that looks at me and sees me as someone older, someone who could have helped her. I turn to her and look in her eyes, into the eyes of the dying child, and speak to her. It's going to be okay, I say to her. It's all I can say with the weight on my chest. It's all I need to say. She stops sobbing and looks at me, almost as if she trusts me. I wish I could help, but I can't. The weight is now off my chest. Every one of us is able to get up. Every one of us is able to leave. And so is she. She disappears. I hope that it knows that wherever it's going to be okay. Outside the school, emergency services are waiting. Apparently, the same thing happened to every single person in school. They didn't see the ghost, but they did feel pinned down. Authorities are blaming it on a gas leak from years of neglect by the people in charge. When I hear that, I start to chuckle. I wonder who they're going to pin the blame on this time. One more story for you, and I promise I've saved a good one to take us out on. Brought to you by our good friend Contour698. Let's hear a story about a man who does something unadvisable in a graveyard, as if there's anything advisable you could do in a graveyard after dark. Let's hear a tale about a grave mistake. Don't get drunk and break into the cemeteries in New Orleans. And if you do, don't piss off any of the tombs with a bunch of X marks all over it. I did that 6 days ago, Saturday, and I've died every day since. After leaving the cemetery that night, I stubbed my foot stepping out on the curve and broke my neck on a wall outside a bar. I dreamed of a woman that night. She wore a white dress and stared at me. But I couldn't have dreamed anything. Do the dead dream? Sunday morning, I woke up in my bed with no hangover. I had a clear head, which was rare for me in the morning, but the details of the night before were a little hazy. I checked myself out in the mirror, but didn't see any signs of damage. I remember tripping on the curve, then the wall of the bar rushing up towards me. I was so drunk that I didn't put out my hand to catch myself. Then, only blackness. Pushing the thought away, I started my day. I left my apartment and walked down the block to the corner diner. Most mornings I needed coffee to chase away my hangover. No hangover that morning, but the craving was still there. I sat at the counter and ordered. A tall, very dark-skinned man was sitting at the counter. He was dressed in an old-fashioned dark purple suit. He had coattails and all. He stood as I sat down and said good morning, and made his way out of the diner. "Be seeing you later," he said to the diner. Everyone ignored him. I turned and looked at him as the door was slowly swishing shut. He tipped his hat to me as he was putting it on. His smile was yellow like his eyes. As the door swung shut, I could see him lighting a cigar. I think he winked at me. After my coffee, I walked over to Jackson Square. Maybe the fortune teller could tell me something. They all turned me down. The real ones did, at least. You can tell which ones are real. After the failure, I walked back towards the river. A carriage horse got spooked by some tourists lighting firecrackers, and caved in the side of my head with a kick. Monday, I woke up again in my bed. This was really happening. I searched the news, but there were no stories about a horse killing one on Decatur Street. I gave in and decided that the only thing for me was to get nice and drunk. I was sober for a whole day. That was an accomplishment for me. Well, sober for a morning at least. That night, I tied one on. I couldn't get enough. At one point, I think I remember that tall guy from the diner buying me a drink. "What's this?" I asked, as he handed me a double shot of something dark. "Oh, it's always rum for me, baby," he said, before throwing back his shot. I didn't care. I would have drunk anything that night. Be seeing you around, he said, before fading into the crowd of the bar. I was shot in the back while walking home. They killed me for the $9 I had in my pocket. In my dreams that night, the lady in white was sitting on a short stool with her back towards me. I walked towards her, but she never turned around. No matter how close I got to her, no matter how far I stretched my hand, I couldn't touch her. Tuesday, I decided to stay in. If I didn't go out, I couldn't die, right? My thought was to drink a fifth of vodka and try to take a bath. I must have passed out, because when I came to, the water was freezing. I slipped getting out of the tub and bashed my head on the rim of the toilet. I still couldn't reach the woman in white. She was working with something in her lap. Every time I walked around to her front to see what she was doing, I would just be looking at her back again. Wednesday, I believed the bed would be my sanctuary. Surely nothing bad can happen to you in bed. Things were going well until I smelled the smoke and heard the sirens. The fire must have started in an apartment below me. I threw open my front door and ran for the stairs. They collapsed as I made my way to the landing. Since I was on the top floor, I had nowhere to go. Resigned, I walked back inside. People were staggering out of my building onto the street below. A crowd formed across the street, and some of them were pointing up at my window. The tall man was standing amongst them, smiling up at me. He tipped his hat as my floor collapsed, and I fell into the inferno below. I found out what the woman in white was working with. This time she was standing. She had a dead chicken in her hand. With a quick motion, she twisted and wrenched the head from the bird. She began chanting and moved in a circle, making a ring of blood on the ground around her. I called to her, but she ignored me. Right before I woke up, she glanced up at me, glaring into my eyes. By Thursday, I'd given up. Whatever was happening to me was out of my control. My room was like it always was. No sign of a fire. As soon as I got up, I went straight for Bourbon Street, because the bars never closed there. With an empty stomach, I got to work. Even on Bourbon Street, drunks aren't well tolerated before noon. After getting kicked out of the third bar, I sat down on the curb with a big-ass beer. The tall man sat down beside me. We were quiet for a few minutes before I asked him, "Why is this happening to me?" Now, don't worry about that, Cher. Just a few more days and it'll all be over. Now, if you hurry, there's a party bus carrying a bachelorette party about to cross Bourbon Street just a few blocks that way." He pointed down the street. "The driver is a man a lot like you. He's out way too late last night, and might not have all his faculties about him." I nodded and stood up. The tall man called to me as I walked away. "Au revoir, mon ami." The bus plowed right through the stop sign. He was right. The driver never saw me. The bus squealed to a halt too late, with me trapped underneath. I could smell my skin melting on the scalding undercarriage. The driver ran out and saw what he'd done. He turned away and vomited as the party rushed out of the bus to see what was happening. A pretty lady wearing a sash that read "Bride" saw me and dropped her tall green novelty drink. The last thing I heard was the screams of her and her bridesmaids. The woman in white walked towards me in a dreamy way that night. She held a dusty bottle with no label that was full of some kind of dark liquor. She stood in front of me and took a big pull from the bottle. With a look of disdain, she held the bottle out to me. I reached for it, but she pulled it away and spat the liquor in my face. She began chanting something in French Creole and walked around me in a circle, stopping periodically to tease me by holding the bottle out in front of her. Every time I reached for the bottle, she would pull it away, take another swig, and spit it back in my face. Her chanting continued in between her taunts. Finally, she stopped and stared at me with hatred. "Time to wake up, fool," she said. It wasn't English, but I understood her. She took one more long pull from the bottle, blood beginning to dribble from between her lips, and spewed it back onto me. I shot up from my sleep and was horrified to find my face and chest covered in blood. I cleaned myself up and spent the rest of the day wandering aimlessly around my apartment. Eventually I headed out and walked around the corner until late into the night. The tall man would be waiting for me in the doorway or the window of a bar, always with a shot of rum held out for me. I just ignored him and walked on. Well after midnight, near the edge of the corridor, I saw her waiting for me on a distant street corner. "Last chance, mon cher," said the tall man, from the doorway of a quiet bar. The bar was dark because it was closing up. It was hard to make out the details of his face, but it looked like he was wearing white paint in the shape of a crude skull. I took the offered shot and drank it down slowly, savoring the burn. She rounded the corner, and I followed. As I walked, I lost sight of her, but she would always be there when I turned a corner or a car passed by, just standing and staring at me from a distance. Eventually, I found myself walking next to the tall white wall. An opening in the wall revealed a huge, ornate iron gate. I stopped at the gate, and it slowly swung open, creaking on its centuries-old hinges. Of course, back where this all began, the cemetery. My feet carried me down the boulevard of this miniature city of the dead. She was gone again, so I scanned the side alleys for her. I saw a flash of her white dress between the crumbling tombs, so I ventured deeper into the cemetery after her. She was waiting for me next to a tomb. The tall man stood with her. When I stopped in front of them, he turned and removed the name plaque from one of the open crypts. The stale air that billowed out smelled of musty decay. He bowed low and gestured me inside. I began to weep, but I still climbed in. I turned onto my back in the tight space and looked up. He smiled at me and said, "It's been a pleasure, truly." He lifted the plaque back up and sealed me inside, covering me in sweet darkness. Finally, I can rest. And just like that, our stories have come to an end once again. But don't be sad. I'm sure we'll have lots more cozy horror to come, right here with Dr. Plague. Until then, I'd like to wish you all a wonderful day and a spooky evening.